just kind of
Have
going
they decided
over.
to submit any PSA stuff yet?
No, not yet.
Gracious.
It's
All right.
crazy. I told them that they really need to start responding to messages and comments in a timely manner. So
Yeah.
like I told them I set up the automatic messenger thinking I'll help slow down people, but it's not. So I actually went ahead and suggested like, hey, have you thought about like maybe getting through these these messages and then turning that feature off and just having people contact you one way, kind of streamline it, but they didn't think that was a good idea. I'm like,
No.
well, you got to make it a priority to respond to these things
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, even if we have to, I guess, right? Did you offer to, or?
yeah, over to yeah, it said the stream has not yet started. It did it again. Or
It's because it's not starting. We have 2 minutes.
okay, maybe
I think
that's
it's scheduled to start at 1 on the dot, right?
no, I thought it was 12:58 on Boxcast, and it
Let's
said the
see.
stream has not yet started.
Virtual subcommittee meeting, and it looks like it's good to go. Yeah. Oh, it's live. We're good.
Oh, now it's live. Okay,
Yep.
cool. I did it right.
All right. Well, I am going to go offline until we get to all of our subcommittee members, or at least 2
Okay,
of them, and I'll be
sounds
back.
good. Perfect.
Hey, Paul, this is Joe Rice with the communications office. How are you?
Good, Joe. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Did you talk to Mike?
I did talk to Mike, and I think we just have one member that's going to be probably about an hour late. So we're trying to maybe have a recess for the first hour and then just have the second hour. We understand we can't have a meeting with just 2 members. So
Right. So I've got a slate all set for currently in recess. And if you know, I could set it for 30 minutes if you think that the staff person would be there at that time, and then we can kind of come back to it. Or if you know it's going to be a 60-minute wait, we can go ahead and schedule it for 60 minutes.
well, Tim's joining now. Let's have both Tim and I talk about it.
Okay.
Hey, Tim, we're just talking about adding a possible recess to this because Jeff can't make it until he just go back to his exact wording here.
Hi, Tim. This is Joe Rice with the Communications Office. How are you? You are currently muted. Love that.
Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. I was just talking to Paul that I did talk to Mike earlier today, and after conferring with Keena Thomas over at the clerk's office, that yeah, well, at least you have to open the meeting, and then it's up to you if you guys want to adjourn altogether and schedule another date or time, or go to recess until you know the staff person will show up. And I was going to throw up a countdown timer if you know it's going to be a 30 or 60-minute wait.
Yeah.
We can also do 30-minute intervals if you like as well.
Let's do 30-minute intervals. He said that it could be 20 minutes and it could be an hour, the full hour. So if we do a 30-minute timer, we check back in 30 minutes, but I don't know if Tim, that works for you.
I can meet up until 2 o'clock. So yeah, if Jeff's available by like 1:30 or 1:20 or 1:30 or whatever, that would be better for me. But I can try to bounce things around while we're in recess.
And Joe, what's the criteria if just two of us are here? The third member of the committee, is that?
You can certainly chat, but no city business.
No city, so we can't talk about any city business. Okay, so even if we're not making decisions or voting on things, we can't talk about it. Got it.
Paul, do we want to? I'm just going to throw this out there as an alternate option. Do we want to try to push this closer to tonight's full commission meeting? Like if we met, I don't know, at 3:30.
Well, the thing is, we can't postpone the meeting since it was advertised for 1 o'clock.
Okay.
So currently we are streaming and any public can view, but it would be up to the subcommittee to decide how long you'd want to go to recess. We could go to recess until, for a couple hours if you so choose, but that could get, for streaming that long, I wouldn't advise it.
Yeah, that sounds suboptimal.
I mean, we could just do, let's say, a 30-minute recess, and then we just we have a 30-minute. We just close it early. We ended at 2 when you have to go, Tim. And we just say, all right, well, 30 minutes to talk, and we'll just make that we'll make good with that time. And if Jeff can't be here, then we'll have to just, I guess the whole thing gets postponed formally at that time.
And we could check back in 15 or 20 minutes if you'd like. I mean, whenever he arrives, I'll have the meeting audible. I can hear what's going on, and we can just check in. And if we have full subcommittee members here, we can certainly start.
Want to do 20 minutes?
I can do 20.
Okay. Thanks, Joe.
Sure.
And yeah, thanks for helping us navigate these important considerations. Should we just mute and leave this meeting running as panelists?
Yes, we will. You can mute your video and audio, but do you need to open the meeting and then declare the meeting in recess?
Okay.
All right. So how do we declare it in recess?
Just say that you will now be going to recess for 20 minutes.
Ah, great. So we'll now be going to recess for 20 minutes.
Sounds good.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. See you soon.
Hey, Tim, this is Joe. I'm back.
Hi, Joe. Looks like we're still maybe waiting to hear from Jeff Pacelli about his availability.
Sure. And when Paul gets back, I guess we
I'm
can
here.
decide. Oh, hey, Paul.
Yeah. Yeah, we could do another 10 minutes, maybe, say? I don't know. Let's see.
Sure.
So-
I'll leave it up to you guys how long you want to go.
Or just say 13 minutes, and at 1:40, if he's not here, we then just decide to postpone it.
I think that's reasonable. Yeah. And then if postpone and reschedule.
Yeah. Okay.
So time it to 1:40.
That'd be great. Yep.
Perfect.
Just give us
Okay.
20 minutes. Thanks very much.
Yep.
Thanks again.
Hi, Jeff. This is Joe Rice with the Communications Office. How are you?
Hey, good afternoon, Joe. Thanks.
Welcome. I
Uh,
believe it was Tim that only could stay till 2.
Hey, gang.
Uh,
Hey, Jeff.
hey,
so I'll let you guys get on with it once Tim gets on.
Thanks very
Welcome,
much.
Jeff.
appreciate all the help, Joe. Hey, Tim.
Hey, Jeff. Hey again, Paul.
Hey,
Joe.
Jeff. Sorry about the stress as you trying to get out of your other meeting, but anyway.
Yeah, we had this pre-scheduled for 4 p.m. today, and we got notice this morning that it was rescheduled to 1 o'clock. Gotta love it.
Yeah. No, all good. Well, let's. I'll jump right into it, and I'll just share my screen. Assuming I can just share like normal here. Host is disabled participant screen sharing. Joe, could you allow me to share my screen?
I just did, Paul.
Great. All right. So I think I'll start with just our this presentation from the sort of way back when we did our sort of the different roles of the tree commission. You all remember this presentation, but and talk a little bit about. I guess there's a few topics for code to discuss. One is let's look at this list here. So first is what is the code, just to kind of give an overall understanding of what these are. So there's our the standards and design manual, also the ones that sort of lead this process as I understand it. And the codes and ordinances are gonna stop me if you don't know these things, but I know Tim, you probably do. Jeff, I'm not sure what level of understanding you have about how codes are written or ordinances are written. Some?
Yeah, I mean, I have a general familiarity here. I don't know these guys to a T. I know we had these in the initial packet a couple months back, but yeah, I can navigate around for sure.
Got it. All right. So with that packet I sent out, a while ago, I've just basically extracted all of the the 18 pages of city code where they mention the word tree or soil, something associated with trees and planting. So this goes everything from unwanted weeds and vegetation in early chapters to into getting into boundary lines and where if you impact a stream buffer and how you have to sort of add trees back if you damage that. So anyway, these are sort of the codes that each developer has to sort of abide by. And one of the hangups is that it's a massive document. No one's really looking at these. It's sort of understood. There's some sort of familiarity with these, but there's some of the people that really aren't totally familiar with. So this one here, Article 3, talks about standards for townhouses. It's there should be a tree planted every 50 feet, of street frontage. That's sort of that requirement. And then it goes into later saying what those trees should be. They should be, they're defined as large shade trees. So the requirement is large shade trees every, the size of the planting. So anyway, so there's this really clear definition in our codes and ordinances, but it's often rarely followed. So when a reviewer gets these from NDS and Public Works and different groups, it's they're looking at everything else as well, and public and sort of Parks and Rec looks at this as well, but it's usually not a very detailed look, and it's often really difficult to read the plans that get submitted because they're missing the critical data you would need to know what to save something by, or so for instance, let's see here. Let me pull up these. All right. Well, sorry, I'm jumping a little bit into the details here, but what I'm getting at is that these codes are not really clear for general reviewers to look at and reference. And so ideally, we have a spreadsheet, which is kind of what I've started here, that looks at each tick mark and then the code reference here that says are structural root zones identified on the preserved trees, like, and then the code reference, and then the requirements, and then criteria met. And this could be something that a member of NDS or even possibly Mike, could go through each of these elements and say, yes, it's met, no, it's not met, and then started this sort of future code language needed. So a few of these ones that are like, this is for the code audit right now that you're doing, Tim, is sort of what are each of these. So I was hoping that we would go through kind of each of these elements, but I think this might be more of an overview of sort of like the goal. I think is to have this simple checklist that NDS could look at to make sure that what site plans are being proposed are meeting the city's requirements. And right now it's like there's a designation. If the parking lot has more than 19 spaces provided, it has to have a lot more criteria about so many trees per every 8 or 9 spaces. The actual islands for each tree needs to be a minimum like 9 feet or so. I have it all written down.
Is there, Paul, just out of curiosity, is there anything that would be applicable to parking garages as opposed to just parking lots?
For trees or just?
Yeah, just in general.
Like how you surround them with vegetation so you don't see
surrounding them? Or I mean, it would be I don't know. I don't know if this is comparable, and it would be kind of interesting to see if there is some other municipalities that could have something like it. But if you're going to be building a parking garage, should you be offsetting that by planting X amount of trees somewhere else, or something along those lines?
There is criteria if you're putting a parking lot that you need to have a set amount of screening to that parking lot, which is pretty muddy how that can be read and interpreted, which it gets into a pretty complicated set of requirements in my opinion. So for like there's this for screening general, and then they have screening for parking lots. So there needs to be this sort of landscape buffer occurring for those parking lots. That's 10 feet. The trees are 15 feet on center. So it's 20 or more spaces. But so that probably would then apply to the garage, but there's no language in here that says garage necessarily that I'm aware of. So
as distinct from a different structure with its own setback and landscaping requirements, just kind of more generally.
Right. But something that could be potentially added, if that's, I know they're trying to maximize the footprint of the garage. Every lost foot is, lost revenue essentially. So,
I think it would be interesting to have, something like maybe not on the parcel itself, but if they're removing X amount of trees for a parking garage or a similar structure, there should be like a requirement or something to kind of add back to that deficit.
I think the hard part is, well, just because the way that the state codes read, that we, like, it's your land, you can do what you want on it kind of attitude. Like they could literally cut down every tree on that site before they start the parking garage, and it wouldn't, I don't know. Well, maybe not. I mean, it depends on where it is, I guess. It's historic district and all those things. So I don't know. Good question.
It is a good question. And Paul, we kind of broached that with Mark last year in terms of just generally broached it in terms of looking at tree replacement requirements. And maybe that's, strengthening the requirements to replace demo or removed trees in a more robust way to kind of accelerate the canopy replacement. That's like one area that we could look at specific language and recommend amendments. But you know, it's not necessarily tied to the parking garage use that Jeff you're asking about, but just in general, I think.
Yeah, just in general, yeah, for sure.
I think for every development site, you know, we can look at opportunities to recommend strengthening the replacement requirements.
Yeah, and then the other element too is how. So you know, currently there's a replacement requirement that's for impacted preserved trees. So if a developer impacts the critical root zone, that tree dies, or you know it's severely injured, they have to replace that per the city's BMPs, which give the BMP requirement is right here. So you know, if they use a 30-inch caliber tree, they have to have 10 3-inch caliber trees. So you know, each 3-inch caliber tree is probably, you know, installed maybe $800, $1,000. So you have to pay $10,000 if you kill a big tree, essentially. But there are lots of examples of trees that have died as a result, or sort of greater than 36 inches, that have died as part of recent projects in the city that no one then retroactively penalized the developer for that. Just,
Yeah.
you know,
Who specifically would enforce that? Would it be NDS, or how does that happen?
Well, it's a question. I don't think anyone does it now. Like the only enforcement that happens is happening at the erosion and sediment control plan oversight or review process. I mean, I'm sure there may be technically somebody who's looking after that, but I've never heard of anyone in all my time in the city ever looking at that or going back to review anything related to trees and their impact and their sort of demise. So I know that there was a plan for a parking garage on Rose Hill Drive that surrounded it in a very large tulip poplar in their design, in the drawings, which could have killed the tree without a doubt. They didn't protect the critical root zone. But in the end, the sort of developer said, well, you guys approved this and we're going to take it down. You know, like, should we just take it down? Because it's probably going to die anyway. And then the city sort of said, yeah, it's going to die. Might as well take it down. But there was never any, you know, now that's just a cleared lot for that site. I'm just trying to, it's an example that comes to mind. But anyway, so I don't know who manages that. And so that also is sort of part of the question too, is who's really looking after these things and who's on site looking at stuff. And so the other, you know, I showed these, you know, instances before, but you know, this is again that townhouses, you know, street tree frontage, etc. It's like all these new developments go in, and the goal is to sort of maximize the footprint of these communities. You know, maximize the footprint. You know, it's all about building, taking up as much lot as possible so that the developer can get as much money as possible, but also so that they can then get their affordable housing in there. But what we're doing is creating, you know, these really inhospitable streets that are, you know, from a future standpoint are, you know, high carbon, you know, offsetters and, you know, all the et cetera. So, yeah.
Sorry, how does that work for like a Southern Development Homes project? Like I live like right next to the one on Corey Park, basically.
Yes.
With, you know, zoned single family residential overall in the master plan. How does that differ versus townhomes as far as their requirements?
I'm not obviously a code reviewer, and this is where I'd love to have NDS sort of involved in this discussion. But you know, my understanding is these are sort of special use, you know, conditions where they're able to build these. These are all Southern homed, you know. So
for a different purpose, obviously.
Different purpose, right? But for some reason, they're getting away with these sort of alley conditions. You know, even though it's not frontage, you know, that's a pretty wide stretch of, you know, no, they're kind of treated like frontage functionally. But anyway, there's lots of places where it just has no trees where you're like, this is terrible. Like, how does the city get away with this, even though there are code requirements that they're able to just ignore for the sake of, you know, maximizing their profits? Yeah. So I don't know, just having a box that you can check that says, are they meeting it? And if they're not, why? Seems pretty critical. And then obviously the preservation of trees, you know, just, you know, just because there's a fence around something doesn't mean that tree is sort of, this tree back here, healthy tree. You could easily argue that this tree was, compromised by the building, in irreparable decline. And so this would then trigger that $10,000, fine essentially for, 10 new 3-inch caliber trees, but no one's enforcing that. So, how do you let the developer know that if they don't, protect this tree in the design of it, then they have penalties coming down the road? Other things, you don't see, your utility plans never have the trees shown on them. So like the preserved trees or the critical root zones shown. So you have no way of assessing if those utility plans are actually impacting the trees that you're saving. So it's, it's like the same goes for this project where they just didn't show any of these critical root zones. They didn't map where those would show up on the future plan, so that you don't see that you're losing most of your critical root zone due to a parking garage happening right next to this.
And that does not seem difficult to me. I mean, it's basically you're overlaying your landscape plan on your utility plan for some CAD drawings. It's a very easy fix to like, I don't know if, to add that requirement or something for plans, but.
Well, that's what we sort of asked both NDS and we've actually requested a meeting since last January with to have a meeting with NDS members, but we've sort of been left in the cold to ever meet. They have no interest in meeting with us to talk about these concerns about how to improve the site plan process. So this would be add preserved trees and critical root zones on proposed utility plans, add them to proposed grading plans, add grading to proposed planting plans, like just so that someone could read it and give an assessment of what is actually being done, so that you get what you are, what's in the code. But for some reason, the meeting hasn't happened, and we just keep bringing it up and talking about it. But so I feel like, if nothing else, we just have to just make sure that when the code audit process is underway, that one, we're not throwing out good codes that we have, and two, we're sort of reminding everyone about what the current codes are and how they're being or not being enforced. And this is just like that site plan review process. Like there's no transparency in the process. You don't know when drawings are required, when their submissions are due, when there are multiple dates for resubmission, when staff response dates are due. So, if there's a preliminary approval date versus, I guess they have the preliminary approval, but sort of add that, preliminary and final.
Is that all built into the ordinance? Like the staff response has to be within 3 business days, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I don't know exactly when staff need to have their responses, but I know that in the past we used to submit, they'd say, all right, we're going to submit a response back on this date, like this comment sent, but we never have any idea when the comments were sent. If we were to add any elements to that, if we were to look at drawings or ask any questions, like there's an uncertainty about how the whole thing goes down. But anyway, I know we have 2 minutes left, and I've talked a lot.
I'm going to jump in real quick because I can potentially stay past 2, but probably not. But I just wanted to say that last topic, I think, it depends on the type of application, but most of those review periods and schedules are actually determined by code and review requirements. And many localities will go ahead and basically effectively copy and paste that into their local codes and ordinances. But even if it's not specified, there's still an underlying state level requirement to move things along by a certain number of days, whether it's 30 or 55 or 60, depending on the sort of thing. But I was going to say, it almost seems like for the next meeting, we can kind of be prepared with buckets of project work that this committee needs to work on. And there's a big bucket that deals with zoning text amendments. How do we actually request code amendments that either simplify and consolidate some of these technical requirements, or increase and expand and enhance them where necessary. But then there's this whole other bucket relating to administration, and I don't know that we're going to be able to fully tackle that within the comp plan zoning ordinance thing. That's more the meeting that, Paul, you've been talking about, how do we, as tree commissioners, assist NDS in the ongoing review process? But there's actually a linkage between the two where we can look at the ordinance for like site plan submittal requirements and specify like, hey, you need to submit at least one sheet that layers tree preservation and grading and utilities and demo, or however we want it to be orchestrated to actually be able to analyze these plans. And I should say, in order for the plans to be analyzed by staff correctly, and to have those layers, layered in a way that's going to allow them to enforce the ordinance. And it could be any number of things that we talk about in terms of the submittal requirements, or even specifying the process. If there's a way to kind of get some language in there about procedural review of site plans or other things, which could be beneficial for everybody, for staff and developers and the public, if there was more clarified and consistently applied process. But it seems like there's a whole constellation of things that we can tackle, and maybe trying to group them into these buckets, and then just start building off of all the things that Paul has done over the past several years. And then since this meeting was a little bit fluid at the beginning, and considering Paul's time on the commission is short, I don't know if it's possible with everybody's schedules and with city resources. We should ask Brian tonight how many more times we can meet between now and the end of March. Like, it'd be nice to have at least 2 more of these committee meetings.
Yeah, we can meet as much. I mean, as long as we give that 5-day notice, we can meet. I mean, I definitely feel like we have to have a work session where we go through each point.
Nitty-gritty of it, yeah, for sure.
And I don't know also what time works well. It could be that. Yeah,
this one was pretty different. This is not typically less than 4-hour notice for a company-wide meeting change.
So, no. That's no big deal. I just wonder, do we make this a evening work session if that works better for folks, or I don't know, just try to knock it out one evening and do that.
Let's think about that. Maybe we can touch on it tonight at the full commission meeting, or just let's figure that one out, because we've got a little bit of momentum built up here, and we can kind of continue that. I'm kind of open to whatever if we plan it ahead of time and the lunchtime after. Yeah. But to really get into it, maybe at least one evening session as a committee, would also be good to spend like a large chunk of time working on it and pushing it forward.
Yeah. Okay. And then the other element is just the standards and design manual. I know that we just basically did, a big update to that, but they just forgot to add the preservation chapter in there, and how to sort of assess critical root zones of trees. And so we just wanted to make sure that that language that's in the BMPs about how to, if you impact a tree, you got to add this replacement, details, that shows up in the standards and design manual and not just in a BMP. So that was kind of one of those things we wanted to add to that. And I think it was just sort of like, okay, you guys just do it, send it to us, and like, we couldn't. For some reason or another, the contractor that was was putting that revised packet together didn't want to do that work, so it falls on us. So anyway, that's kind of how the first round went anyway. So we basically revised it all with Mike and got sign off, and then just submitted it and then just hit print. So. Yeah. All right. Well, so for next steps, there are sort of, in my mind, 2 documents. One is the code of ordinances, and sort of a review of process with NDS, possibly how to get those reviews. Like maybe choosing which elements of the code ordinance are good elements and which ones maybe we want to add. There are some other precedents, like in Norfolk and other areas, that have good precedents we can rely on that are from other places in the Commonwealth. So I have all the code ordinances saved from Norfolk, from Alexandria, from other sort of tree-friendly cities that we could, crib from. So I can pass those along, or maybe closer to an actual meeting. The next meeting we sort of independently review those and see which ones we like the best. Or everyone takes one one packet and says, all right, which ones are tree associated.
Yeah, that sounds good. I would be good for doing one of these longer evening work sessions, and then seeing how much we can get done in a good chunk of time there, and then if we need a couple smaller follow-ups, during the day or during the week, or evening, whatever, maybe we think about doing that.
Yeah, that works. I also know in the past too, like Mark Rylander, he did a really good job of just being sort of the scribe, if you will. And I don't know if anyone has really articulate note-taking skills, but it's not one of my total strengths, but I usually can help people note.
I'm a lefty, man. Note-taking, not
just checking.
Right in my wheelhouse.
Well, we'll just kind of,
I'm just to jump in. I feel like I can try to help capture some of what we've talked about, even today as a jumping off point, and continuing that throughout, just kind of capturing what we're talking about. And it feels like with my role as a TC liaison on the steering committee for Seville Plans Together, it kind of will. It's a naturally
fall to you,
yeah.
Right division of labor, to kind of carry that forward to that group when the time is right. But
and alternatively, myself as a liaison on the climate action plan, I haven't heard from Susan in like 2 months, so who knows?
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll work on, for our next meeting, I'll try to summarize the standards and design updates that we had, and I'm trying to find our last round of comments that we had made to them that did not get included. That's kind of like the place I want to start, so I should find them. But once I find those, I can ask Mark Rylander if he still has them, which sure he does. So that would be the starting point for the standards and design manual, and then we can sort of decide what we want to write or edit, or the text that needs to change there. And then the codes, I can send you this spreadsheet that I have that looks at like how codes are implemented for NDS to kind of do something with.
Yeah, please do.
Mm-hmm.
And I can also resend our city codes just as a reference. I know you all have them, but
I like quick, easy reference. It doesn't hurt.
Yeah, I know.
It's not painful on your end to send it, but it's helpful on my end.
Yeah, and the other thing I haven't mentioned is the Streets That Work. You hear this often, but there is the Streets That Work packet. In the appendixes of Streets That Work, this was a plan that basically was, they sort of created a street typology for each street. And this is kind of like each street in the city had like a goal for what that kind of street was. And then you sort of assigned a proposed design for that street, like the sidewalk width, the street trees, you have to have this minimum soil volume for all these street trees. And so this was a sort of a vision document that was supposed to inform our code process. So if you look at the appendices of Streets That Work, there's all this language in there that talks about, where, how trees should, be involved in different streets throughout the city. So when you get into these proposed city street plans, like Emmett Street and stuff, we can refer to Streets That Work and say, all right, we had sort of agreed to, large trees with a 6-foot preferred width, for these types of planters. So anyway, that's just another reference to what Streets That Work was and sort of remains, because it's one of those documents that easily gets forgotten about. But it is
who signed off on that?
Pretty much the whole city worked on it. I mean, all city staff worked on it. Obviously the tree commission, but Bike Ped worked on it. It was a full city effort for a non-binding vision document. So it doesn't have any teeth to it really, but it has a lot of good goals. But for instance, I know that, you know, it was sort of required that the Belmont Bridge project meet streets that work, and it was never, their drawings never confirmed that they actually met them. We kept asking them for shows soil volumes to confirm that they were meeting the streets that work, and you know, those never showed up. So it wasn't ever required of them. They just sort of said, yeah, we're going to meet streets that work, you know. So that's where it's really important to take some of the language from streets that work and make sure that gets included, and which we have done into the standards and design manual. So taking some of those soil volume requirements and such and including them into our standards and design manual, and then making sure those get into our ordinances as well, or sort of making sure they reference each other is really critical. Otherwise, what's the point of all the streets to work effort? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the goal, is to figure out how much of that can we efficiently and appropriately get into the code so that it's not all by cross-reference or not just a wish list, but a requirement, you know, again, where appropriate. Can we talk really quickly about if there's a distinction between the standards and design manual, and is there a separate BMPs document, or are you just referencing the BMPs contained in that manual? And I guess two-part question, is the standards design manual referenced by the ordinance as requirements?
That's a good question for staff, which we should ask tonight to confirm that. My understanding is that BMPs are just that. They're just best management practices, even though some departments take them as sacrosanct. You know, some assume that BMPs are it, and they say you have to meet these BMPs, and others, like the tree preservation requirements, are sort of like if you want to, like there's just nobody enforcing it. So whereas utilities may be really strict about their BMPs, other groups aren't. So the goal is to take language from BMPs and get them into the standards and design manual, which would become more codifying. You know.
Yeah, and I've got some work to do to refresh myself and just learn more about each of these, you know, but that's helpful.
Yeah, so I would want to, that's a good question for tonight though, just to sort of double check on exactly, you know, what each of those are. You know.
Tim, if you have another minute, can you just like really high level go over what you're doing as far as the code audit process that was referenced before?
Yeah, I can do that really quickly. So basically, you know, you probably know this, and apologies if it's repeat information, but Seville Plans Together is the name of this like multifaceted effort to update the comprehensive plan, develop an affordable housing plan as like a new component of the comprehensive plan, and then also in conjunction with all of that stuff, actually review and amend the zoning ordinance, you know, where all the ordinances and codes and regulations are. And much of the work has been on the affordable housing plan first, and then the comprehensive plan review and update second. And not a tremendous amount of work on the code update yet, but this is a good time for us to be kind of preparing and getting ready to really jump into that, you know, both feet, when that whole steering committee and all the public engagement process pivots more towards the code and regulations, as opposed to like the long range planning stuff.
Yeah, great, cool.
And the code document itself, my question, I guess, is, you know, what's their strategy? Is their strategy to sort of revise existing, or is it just to throw it out and use their, you know, whoever the developer, you know, the consultant says, oh yeah, we've done this, a good, you know, tree code for another city, you'll just take theirs now? Like, is it a full restart, or is it a, you know, does it work? What do we want to fix? You know, and so I don't want to take a lot of time if it's going to be a total like, hey, we've already got a better plan, you know, better code ordinances in place, and use this one, and we have to relearn it all. Or I just don't want to lose some of the good ones we have that aren't being implemented. So
that's a great question. I don't have the answer, but I'm going to like park that in the bike rack for the next meeting.
Yeah. Because it's a huge document. Like, I don't understand why there's not even like a draft zoning map and text, but like there's no, when I look at these, you know, I'm like, where does the ordinances, where do those get discussed and changed? Or is it just some kind of boilerplate thing that they're just planning to like, oh, done, you know?
Right,
Just-
yeah, like just looking at the graphic for zoning update, I mean, the very beginning of it is final zoning review. Seems a little counterintuitive.
yeah, I don't understand. So anyway, those are the,
And we didn't start, last Thanksgiving on the zoning.
Right.
We haven't had a meeting agenda dedicated to the zoning yet because, the engagement for the comp plan is critically important, but of course they had to redo their whole engagement strategy and methodology and format because of COVID. So I think that, ended up affecting this Gantt chart, but
Yeah.
yeah, I noticed an email from their project manager at Roadside
Hartwell, yeah.
Hartwell, a week or so ago. So I need to get back on that bandwagon and really focus on that again. But that's really like the starting point, I think, is basically this committee is prepared to do a lot of hard, good work to provide recommendations for this process. But before we kind of really get into the meat of that, can you tell us how you all are approaching it? Like if they already have a model ordinance that they're going to recommend or something.
Yeah.
That's unknown right now, but it's a great question.
And also with the comprehensive plan, in the past, they've added language in the comprehensive plan that says like, we want a green community, we want to have, tree-lined streets, but there's never been a correlation with like that model, that language in there on like how to actually do that work. If you sort of, made a requirement that all utility poles happened on one side of the street, if there were to be utility poles, like, at least you allow one side of the street free for street trees, like that, if you want tree line street, but you also have to have, power, unlimited overhead rights on all sides of the street, then you have to, it doesn't match. So I don't know, somehow, saying if we want tree line street, the city should have a goal, and that goal should be, as we have it now, sort of 200 trees a year, and that should like clearly be in the comp plan as like a target to meet our green street strategy, or it's 200 trees a year plus no overhead utilities on one side of the street, or consolidate poles, or whatever it is, or you always have to have new trees need to have this much soil volume, like whatever the language is. Does it show up in the comp plan, and should it? I don't know. I don't know how enforceable the comp plan is and how they're proposing a revision to it right now. But ideally, there'd be something that would say, we want this, here's how we get there, or here's some general goals to get there. Like, if there's no goals for the comp plan, then I don't see its purpose. No.
Yeah, there's definitely goals and objectives and things like that. I'll try to pull up a link to the latest draft and share that, with the whole commission. Really, it doesn't need to be just this committee, but just as an FYI, pass that along. I'll see what I can dig up between 4:30 and 5. I kind of have some time set aside to get ready for the meeting. So, but I got to bounce now. I'm really overdue for something else. But
you're good. Yeah.
Sorry, you had to pivot back and forth, and I was doing the same thing for a meeting I was double booked for. So if your head is spinning, I'm feeling the same way. And Joe, if you're out there, thank you for all your technical and logistical assistance and guidance. Much appreciated.
Seconded.
All right.
Sure thing, guys.
Yeah.
I think that wraps it up.
All right. We'll see you guys at 5.
Sounds good.
All right.
Good luck.
See ya.
See ya.